I grew up on the south side of Chicago. It's not one of the best of places to grow up. There's a lot of shootings all the time. It's just a really different atmosphere from living here in Fort Wayne. You get to do a lot more stuff. It was a fun time for me, just being with my mom and my dad for a little bit. But one night, my dad went to a bar and his friend came from behind and shot him in the head. He was like in a vegetable state, and then after a certain time, they decided to pull his plug, and I saw him like one last time, and yeah, I remember that day pretty vividly. My mom, she was just angry a lot. She was angry at me, angry at the world. There was a lot of crying. She would take like a lot of her stress and anger out on me and stuff like that. So I always knew that something was wrong, but I felt like it's something that we never really talked about. When he died, she definitely started working a lot more, like I barely ever saw her. It was really hard at the same time because we had a lot of like financial problems. We never really had a lot of money, so there were times when she wouldn't eat just so that I could eat. And like that was always hard for me. Being so young, I didn't understand, I think, at the time, like what was going on. So it's kind of something that I just kind of buried inside, and I think I denied a lot of what was going on. I kind of just ignored it, I think, but it was, you know, all kind of building up inside. When I first moved, and even before I moved, I used to get in a lot of fights. I used to have a lot of anger problems. I used to just like get really angry and just do like bad stuff, like break stuff. And I didn't know why. I just had this anger inside of me all the time. I just always was angry. So I went to 3 or 4 elementary schools here, and I started getting kicked out of each one. And it was because of fighting or just different issues like that. And there was specifically one of the elementary schools where the principal, or maybe he was a vice principal or something, we were in his office because I had got in trouble, and he just took the liberty to invite my mom to church. So she did. One day she accepted God, and she started changing, but it was a really slow process. It took years. There was so much anger, there was so much pain and things in her that she didn't really have maybe even too much love to give me. Like I remember not getting a lot of affection from her. And I feel like God started working in her, taking away some of that anger. When she started following Christ, she would make me like memorize scripture verses and read me scripture verses of the Bible, but it was, I don't think I wanted it. One day I was sitting in church with my mom, and there was like this preacher who came from out of town, and he was like speaking really powerfully and stuff like that. And at the end of the service, he said, "Is there anybody that wants to give their life to Christ? Come up to the altar right now." Because back then it was like you got to come to the altar if you want to do it. It wasn't like raise your hand. And at first I didn't want to do it because I was like embarrassed. But I said, "God, if you want me to become a Christian, if you want me to follow you, if you want me to give my life to you, you know, give me a sign." And there was something inside of me that was like moving me, like almost like lifting me out of my seat to go. And eventually I said, "Well, God, I guess this is you." For a year or two, you're all about God, I guess. But eventually you go through changes, you know, middle school and high school. And if you don't have the right people around you, you can veer off of the right path. I started getting involved with a lot of friends and doing a lot of stuff that I shouldn't be doing. Drugs, it was alcohol, it was sex, it was anger. My grades started dropping. I was out all night until 5 o'clock the night before on Saturday night. So the next morning I didn't want to come to church. I stopped praying, I stopped reading my Bible. So my relationship with God kind of just disappeared because of me, because I stopped pursuing him. There was always like temporary happiness, temporary love, but there's always consequences to what's going on. As far as school, I was able to get myself a scholarship for track to a school called Chicago State. So it's like I was going back to where I came from. The day was Wednesday, and I was leaving to go there on Friday and move into my dorm and start school. When you're going to do a sport and you're going like Division I, you have to get cleared by a clearinghouse. And they reached out to me, my coach did, and he said that the NCAA hadn't cleared me. That's where like everything just kind of fell apart. When you're walking in this lost place, when you're walking away from the Lord, eventually something has to happen. I basically lost my scholarship and I had to enroll at a community college. And that was like something really painful for me. The first whole year I spent like even worse. Like I think I got depressed. I would just train and then come back into my room. I wouldn't talk to anybody, not even my own parents. My room was always dark. I just remember like living in this darkness. But instead of it being like, oh God, I'm sorry, it was more like, God, why would you do this to me? I hate you. I was determined to get my scholarship back. So I started like sneaking into certain schools that had a track. And eventually, like one by one, they would like catch me running out there. They would be like, you can't be here. You know, we know you're not doing anything wrong, but this is private property. And I just remember I said, I can't do this anymore. And I walked to my car. I got in, I slammed the door, and I reached over and picked up my phone. And when I picked it up, it was ringing, and there was an unknown number. And so I said hello, and it ended up being this guy who owned a sports facility, which is AWP, Athletes with a Purpose. He said, hey, you were here a couple months ago, you did a test trial. And I told him basically what happened, and he said, why don't you come train with us? And you know, we can figure it out. And so I went in there and I sat down with Jeff. I think it was like a God thing because I was just placed in front of him. I just told him everything, which is weird because it's this guy that I've never met before in my life, but I just opened up to him about everything, all the sins that I was doing. I didn't know he was a Christian, but I could tell there was something different about him. He basically said to me, Aaron, I think God is telling me that there is a reason why you lost your scholarship, but I think that it's not over. So I started going there after I had this talk with him. They help you reach a certain goal. They don't just train you physically, they train you like mentally and even spiritually. And eventually like that started like moving stuff inside, letting God pour back into my life. And that's where the changes started coming. He hit the restart button on my life. And my life has changed a lot. I'm not perfect in any way. I still make a lot of mistakes. There's always sin that you have to deal with and stuff. But you know, that's why he died on the cross. And that's what gives me hope. He just left me like a clean slate. But I'm thankful for it.